Welcome to the P.A.S. Report podcast. If you're tired of censorship, outraged by government abuses, and thirsty for real insights, then you're in the right place. Get ready, because here, the fight for freedom never ends. Here's your host, Professor Nick Giordano.
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the America's Founding series, where we delve into the lives of the extraordinary and often overlooked patriots who helped shape the birth of this nation. I'm your host, Professor Nick Giordano, and I'm glad you could join me today. Make sure to follow and subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss an episode. Also, visit the P.A.S. Report website, PASreport.com, and share this episode with your family, friends, and other great patriots out there, because today we're going to start off with a provocative question, one that challenges what you think you know about American liberty. Because what if one of the greatest voices for American liberty, a man whose powerful words stirred the colonies to action against the British, ultimately refused to sign the very document that would declare our independence? What if he balked when it came to severing ties with Britain, even after helping lay the ideological groundwork for the revolution itself, where he wanted to make amends with the British? That's the tension at the heart of our story today. And we're talking about John Dickinson, a man once universally known as the Penman of the Revolution. His story isn't one of unyielding and fiery rebellion, but it was a deeply principled, agonizing, thoughtful commitment to liberty through law, not just revolution. And our journey with John Dickinson begins not on the battlefield, but in the quiet studies, the refined circles of the colonial elite. He was born into privilege in 1732 in Maryland, and though he would spend much of his life in Pennsylvania, Dickinson was set on a path for intellectual pursuit. He received one of the greatest educations, and it culminated in his legal training at the prestigious Middle Temple, which is in London. Now, there, he's going to be steeped in centuries of English constitutional law, absorbing the works of Enlightenment thinkers like John Locke and Montesquieu. He's going to understand the Enlightenment principles, and it was during these formative years that Dickinson developed a bedrock belief in the inherent rights of Englishmen, rights that he understood were enshrined and protected by the British Constitution itself. This wasn't a radical notion at the time. Many colonists believed the problem wasn't the British Crown or Parliament per se, but it was a deviation from established legal principles that were set. And Dickinson saw liberty not as something that had to be seized through war and chaos, but as a meticulously constructed edifice built and maintained through the rule of law. The rule of law, the very basis, the very foundation of a society. And this understanding is going to shape his entire approach to the brewing crisis with Great Britain. He wasn't a hothead, he was a thinker. He was a scholar, he wasn't a bomb thrower. He was a man who believed deeply in ordered liberty, not anarchy and chaos. As tensions with Britain mounted in the 1760s, which were driven by oppressive taxes like the Stamp Act and later the Townshend Act, the colonies needed a voice. They needed someone who could articulate their feelings, the sentiments, the grievances, and they needed someone that had the intellectual rigor and persuasive power. And that voice, eloquent and undeniably influential, emerged from John Dickinson. In 1767 and 1768, he published a series of essays, anonymously at first, under the powerful title Letters from a Farmer in Pennsylvania. And he did it anonymously because obviously if he puts his name out there, he's going to be a target. But these letters were a hit. They were a sensation. They were reprinted in newspapers across the colonies, read aloud in tavern halls, and it was debated in colonial assemblies. Even Britain recognized the clarity and logic that John Dickinson was laying out. And his core argument was devastatingly simple, but it was profoundly effective. Parliament had no right to impose taxes on colonies without their consent. And he wasn't arguing for independence, at least not yet. He was arguing for constitutional rights, and he urged caution. He wanted reasoned discourse and nonviolent resistance. Petitions, boycotts, legal appeals in British courts. He believed that revolution should be the absolute last resort. And he understood that if it comes to revolution, it's going to be a tragic failure of reason, not the first response to injustice. I mean, when you listen to his own words, when you read them, the words resonate. You see the caution.
The cause of liberty is a cause of too much dignity to be sullied by turbulence and tumult. It ought to be maintained in a manner suitable to her nature. Those who engage in it should breathe a sedate yet fervent spirit, animating them to actions of prudence, justice, modesty, bravery, humanity, and magnanimity.
He was establishing himself as the intellectual conscience of the colonies, firm in his defense of the rights, but genuinely fearful of rash action that could plunge them into a destructive and unwinnable war. I constantly say it. We are going to go up against the supreme military power of the time. We didn't have the training. We didn't have the resources. We didn't have professional soldiers. We were a bunch of misfits. And John Dickinson worried that we weren't going to be able to win a revolution. And so we have to win with words. He was no Samuel Adams, we'll put it that way. I mean, Samuel Adams was one of those firebrands. But John Dickinson's vision was of a reformed empire where colonial rights are going to be respected within the framework of British law. He was holding on to hope even as others began to lose their hope. And it's interesting because a lot of people think that even Benjamin Franklin was this fiery revolutionary. But Benjamin Franklin tried to make amends with the British. He tried to conduct diplomacy so that we could see reforms. It was only after he realized in 1774, 1775 that there was going to be no reconciliation that he began supporting the idea of revolution. Now, we need to take a quick commercial break, but we're going to explore the monumental moment that defined John Dickinson's legacy. So hang tight and we'll be right back. Are you ready to move easily and independently without pain and stiffness holding you back? Do you want to look in the mirror and see a hydrated glow instead of more fine lines and wrinkles? Well, discover Native Path Collagen, made with only type 1 and 3 collagen fibers. These are the two most important types that make up 90% of the collagen found in your cartilage, bones, skin, hair, nails, and gut. They provide maximum benefits. And Native Path Collagen is a single ingredient formula with no fillers, additives, or artificial sweeteners. Plus, it's third-party tested for heavy metals, ensuring purity and safety. Completely flavorless, Native Path Collagen can be added to anything: coffee, smoothies, oatmeal, you name it. It doesn't clump, it absorbs fast thanks to its peptide formula. And the best part, Native Path offers amazing bundle deals at a fraction of the price of other brands. With over 4 million jars sold, 1 million happy customers, 8,000 5-star reviews, and a 365-day no-risk guarantee, Native Path is a brand you could trust. They offer an 800 number for any questions you may have, and then you'll speak to a real person who's there to help. Visit getnativepath.com/PAS and start your transformation today. That's getnativepath.com/PAS. Welcome back to the America's Founding series. Now, before the break, we left John Dickinson, the respected legal scholar, the penman of the revolution, standing on the precipice of a decision that's going to forever define his place in American history. He had eloquently argued for colonial rights, ignited the flames of resistance with his powerful prose, yet he recoiled from the ultimate act, which was rebellion. So now we get to the summer of 1776. It's hot. It's Philadelphia. The Continental Congress is wrestling with this question of independence. As a delegate from Pennsylvania, John Dickinson is going to be at the very heart of the debate. He understood the grievances perhaps better than anyone. He'd spent years fighting them with his pen, but he believed the colonies weren't ready. He saw the fragile state of their military, the lack of foreign alliances, the immense power of the British Empire, and he genuinely feared that a premature declaration is going to lead to a catastrophic defeat, wiping out any hope of liberty and really showing what British tyranny would look like. So on July 1st, 1776, when the vote for independence came up, John Dickinson stood firm. He argued passionately against signing on to the Declaration of Independence. He advocated for a delay. He wanted to try reconciliation. He believed in prudence. July 2nd comes along. The final vote is going to be taken. And John Dickinson, the man who had done so much to awaken the spirit of liberty, the spirit of revolution, ultimately votes against the Declaration of Independence. And his principles stand. It wasn't born out of a disloyalty to the colonies. It was born out of a profound conviction that this was not the right moment, that reconciliation was still possible, that the costs of war were too high for an unprepared nation. And he ultimately refused to sign the Declaration of Independence. And this is going to be a decision that's going to cost him dearly because his reputation took a major hit. It alienated him from many of his peers. Essentially, he was persona non grata. He was an outcast in the very revolution that he helped inspire. But there's an extraordinary twist to this. The act that truly defines his character, the man he is, his unique brand of patriotism. Despite his vote, despite his disagreement, despite his personal anguish, Dickinson did not abandon his principles or his country. Instead, he's going to voluntarily join the Continental Army and serve as a private in the Pennsylvania militia. Now, think about that. The penman of the Revolution picked up a musket. He put his life and livelihood on the line. This guy that was born in privilege is going to risk everything for the very cause he couldn't bring himself to declare on paper. It shows you the type of man that he is. Think about the courage it must have taken to stand against the tide and then fight for a cause that you publicly opposed purely out of loyalty to your own countrymen. It really is remarkable. It's so easy out there to do the right thing. It's so easy to join the crowds. It's so easy to join the majority. But when you stand against it, that's where the real test of courage comes into play. And John Dickinson showed what courage looks like, even if we disagree with him. It's easy to look back in our history and pretend that everyone was all in on the revolution, that everyone was all in on the Declaration of Independence. I mean, that's how we oversimplify our history in the education system. It's why so many are completely unaware of the real founding of this country. And the fame of the Declaration signers, well, their fame soared. That's what the textbooks cover. Dickinson quietly faded from the revolutionary spotlight. But his story was far from over because he was a builder. More importantly, he was a man committed to the practical work of creating a functional republic, not a democracy. After the war, Dickinson's going to return to public life. He plays an indispensable role, and a lot of times he doesn't get the credit he deserves. He played the role in nation building here in the United States. Understand that when countries first emerge, within a decade, they usually collapse. And we saw that here in the United States. The Articles of Confederation, it wasn't working. Our government essentially collapsed. Dickinson's going to draft state constitutions for Delaware and Pennsylvania, and it's going to demonstrate his commitment to orderly governance. It's why in 1786, he actually chaired the Annapolis Convention. This was a crucial precursor to the Philadelphia Convention. Today, we know it as the Constitutional Convention. But the Annapolis Convention was a disaster. Only 5 out of the 13 states are going to send representatives. There's going to be a lot of distrust. But we ended up getting the Constitutional Convention the following year. And Dickinson was there again. He's going to advocate for a strong but limited national government. He understood the importance of balancing federal power with state sovereignty, something that doesn't really exist today. He helped shape the very framework of the United States and the concept of federalism. And sadly, most people out there have no idea what federalism is. Ever the penman, he would go on to defend the new Constitution that's being developed in a series of essays that were titled The Letters of Fabius. Once again, he used his formidable intellect to persuade and inform the American public. But perhaps one of his most profound acts, one that's often overlooked, it reveals the depths of his personal convictions. John Dickinson voluntarily emancipated his slaves during and after the Revolution. Now, this was initially a rare and courageous act for a wealthy landowner in that era. So it was a testament to his dedication to liberty, not for a privileged few, but for many, regardless of race, color, religion, or creed. He truly understood what liberty looks like. And there would be several founding fathers that are going to follow his lead and emancipate their slaves as well. So the influence he had was great, and he was a bridge, bridging the gap between colonial resistance and the arduous work creating a stable government, bridging the ideal of liberty with the difficult, sometimes unpopular decisions required to achieve it, tempering the people's expectations of what the government can and cannot do. In 1808, John Dickinson would pass away, and his complex legacy is going to be overshadowed for many years by the more celebrated figures of the American Revolution. Yet his internal conflict, the deep desire for rights combined with a profound reluctance for war, reflects the broader colonial mood more accurately than many realize. And it's one that you have to respect. Many colonists did want reform. They didn't want outright revolution and war. Dickinson gave voice to the cautious, hopeful that segments of the society would be able to work things out. And his influential writings, the letters from the farmer in Pennsylvania, undeniably shaped the ideological foundation of American resistance long before the first shot was fired. He is a man that's responsible for building that American grit that's part of the American identity. And he articulated the principles that would eventually justify independence, even if he himself was the last to embrace the final step of war. His life reminds us that courage comes in many forms. It's not just found on battlefields or in signatures on historic documents. Courage is found in sticking to your convictions, even when the crowd turns against you. Courage is when you argue for what you believe in that's right, even if it's going to make you unpopular. Courage requires you to serve your country faithfully, even when you may disagree with its path, as long as it's working within the constitutional framework, as long as it's working in the realm of justice. This is something that we are in short supply of today. Special interests are what drives everything. And perhaps if we knew more about those who built this nation, we wouldn't be in the position we're in today, where so many will freely surrender their rights, their liberties, for the illusion of security. Now, we rightly celebrate people like Benjamin Franklin, George Washington, Thomas Jefferson. These were giants amongst men. But sometimes we also find the wisest voices, the most enduring lessons, from the ones who take a step back, to keep our mouth shut, to think, to build, even amidst the most fervent calls for immediate action. You want to be careful with that knee-jerk reaction. And John Dickinson was. His voice, reluctant but ultimately indispensable, made him an American revolutionary. And I hope John Dickinson's story speaks to you and prompts you to reflect on how the tension between principle and pressure continues to shape our political climate today. Now, if you enjoyed this episode, make sure you subscribe to the P.A.S. Report podcast, wherever you get your podcasts. Visit PASreport.com and share this episode with your family and friends who love history, who love this country, other great patriots. I want to thank you for listening, and I'll be back next week with another great episode of the America's Founding series on the P.A.S. Report.
Thank you for listening to the P.A.S. Report. Don't forget to rate, share, and hit that subscribe button. That way you'll never miss an episode. For more exclusive content and updates, visit us at PASreport.com and follow Professor Giordano on all social media platforms at P.A.S. Report.